1. All right, we're down to our last couple classes. We're going to count down every class from here on out. We're down to 3 classes left. Monday and Wednesday of next week. The following Monday we don't have class. The classroom will be open. You can attend and work on your projects, but it's finals week and we are only required to be there Monday or Wednesday. So the final portfolio is due on Wednesday. So I'll probably repeat this every class here on out. So Monday and Wednesday next class or next week are last official meeting times of this class. You can still use the lab though the following Monday after that if you still need extra time to work on your projects. So today we're going to work on creating floor plans from Sketchup. We're going to create floor plans. We're going to create a floor plan from Sketchup, and we're going to do the post-production in Photoshop. Okay, we're going to do this exact, very similar exercise for a section cut and for a perspective next week. Okay, but for the most part, the techniques that we talked about last class are very much the same and very relevant to what we talked about today. We're just going to apply them in a different way. So that's going to be the process in which to which we walk through this evening. All right. So we're going to create a floor plan in SketchUp. So where this might actually become relevant, yes, we've already created floor plans in AutoCAD. So technically, if you think about the if you look at the process of how we started to create the cabin, it's very different actually in terms of how you would actually do it in the real working world, or even how you would do it in lab. But what we're really focusing on is the post-production aspect of it. It is very possible that in your studio class, you may make a SketchUp model right away. You may not do a CAD floor plan or CAD elevations or anything like that. You might jump right into the SketchUp model. So it is very possible that you may make a floor plan right from SketchUp. And if you have SketchUp Pro, you can actually export them. You can export your floor plan into a CAD file. That is a possibility. Victor, you might grab that light. So that is a possibility. So it's good to know how to export or how to do post-production from AutoCAD into Photoshop, and also do SketchUp into Photoshop. So what we do today would be the exact same process as if you plotted your work directly from AutoCAD. But we're going to look at it from as if you did it right from the SketchUp model. All right. The end goal is going to be a lot different though than what you can actually get out of AutoCAD. All right. So up to this point, everybody should have a completed cabin. Okay, it might look, actually it probably looks nothing like mine, but you have some kind of cabin that you're working with. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump right into this. It's pretty quick today. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about creating section cuts. All right. So the process of creating a floor plan is very much the same process of creating an actual building section. All right. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start by doing a very similar process to which we created our elevations. Okay, the first thing that we did was we actually created a box. Okay, we created a box like so, to which allowed us to create a flat surface to which to cut the section cut from. Okay, so when we create a floor plan, and we talked about this a little while ago, we talked about creating that floor plan at about a 4-foot height. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this box to that 4-foot height. All right. If you want to cut it at a different height, maybe there's a more optimum height, 3 foot tall, maybe it's 5 foot tall. That's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and do it at kind of the default standard 4 feet. So 4 feet, and we're going to get something that kind of looks like that. All right. So I believe everyone in this classroom, I think all of the computers here at DVC have the section cut tool already installed on SketchUp. You may not have it at home. I don't think it's by default a default tool that's installed in SketchUp. If somebody knows that, correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think so. If you don't have it, you can download it from the 3D Warehouse. So there's all kinds of great apps for SketchUp. If you don't see it over here in your large tool set, I've already turned it on, but you're going to want to go over to View, Toolbars, and you're going to check the box that says Section. Okay. So you can see here, it's right up here in the upper right-hand corner. When I click on Section, I get that tool right here. And for those of you that have maybe experience working in a firm before, you know that little symbol is the symbol of a section head. okay? Or if you use Revit, you'll know that that's the typical symbol that you'd use to make a section. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click on that, okay? And you'll notice that as I move my mouse around, it basically is looking for a plane to which you're going to cut that section from. So I want a nice flat plane, okay? So I'm going to use the top of this box, okay? I could also look for, and as I'm doing this, pay attention to the color of that plane. So we talked about what each of those colors mean. We've talked about the green, the red, and the blue axes in the model. So we know that by seeing the blue section box right here, we know that we're on an orthogonal plane. Okay, we know we're not, it's like something like this, where that's actually a sloped plane. So by seeing that pink, I know it's a sloped plane. It's not orthogonal, so that's not going to work well for a section cut, unless you want a section cut that's at like a 60-degree angle or something like that, which wouldn't be right. All right, so there's a red section plane. So that would work really well if I wanted to do an actual section cut. That would be actually next class. Okay, we'll talk about that more before I get too far. Next class. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is when we click on that section button, we're going to click on the top of our cube. Okay, if you by chance have a flat surface in your model, that will also work. Okay, some of you may have a flat roof, that would probably work. A flat porch, that would also work. I like doing the box because I know it's exactly 4 feet. Okay, if you have a cabin that, let's say, has some steps that lead up to the front door, you're going to need to factor that into how tall that little cube is. So if you have to walk up 4 steps and that's 3 feet or whatever it is, you need to probably create a cube that's about 7 feet tall so that you're actually cutting in the right location. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the top of that cube. All right, and here we're going to, you'll notice that we got a nice looking, basically, nice floor plan. All right, just double checking that recording. All right, so this is what we get. If we look at it from directly above, you'll notice that all of our lines that we're cutting through are all nice and dark, so we know that that's actually the cut surface. All right, very similar to as if we did it in AutoCAD. That's basically our goal, is that we have nice bold lines around our cut surfaces. All right, so some of you guys may run into the problem where it doesn't look quite this complete, and that's understandable, being that this may be the first SketchUp model that you've created. Getting nice even cut walls all the way through your buildings can sometimes be a little bit of a difficulty. If that's the case, that's okay. Do the best you can. Don't spend an entire day trying to fix all that so that you get a good floor plan. If you're missing a few lines in a handful of locations, I would just correct it in Photoshop. Okay, and I'll show you how you could go about doing that a little bit later. So luckily, I've used this model lots of times and I know it works well. All right, so now we want to go through the process of creating the floor plan. All right, so what I'm going to do, similar to creating the elevation, is I am going to go up to View, and I'm going to go, or Camera, and I'm going to go to Standard Views Top. Okay, so like last class, what is the problem with this view? I asked the same question. It's still in perspective, right? It's not quite an actual, darn it, forgot to turn off that autosave. I do it every time. Every time I do this lecture, I deal with this. All right, so the little spinny wheel is going to spin for about 30 seconds. But yes, we need to change it from perspective to a parallel projection. Thank you. So that should turn off in just a second. I will still see somewhat a few of my walls, because a lot of my interior, the base of my interior walls are actually canted, so they're at a slope. So you will somewhat kind of see that, but not to the degree that we see them now. All right, good. So if you want to turn off that autosave, we learned how to do this last class. You can go over to let's see, is it Window? Yeah, Preferences, General, and then maybe turn it from 5 minutes to like 10 minutes or something like that. So you won't have to deal with that stoppage too much. All right. So right now I have a few things I need to fix. I need to turn off my section plane. I need to turn off my guides, and I need to make this a parallel projection. All right. So I am going to go up to Camera. I'm going to turn on parallel projection. Okay. So that fixed that. You still see somewhat of, it kind of looks like a perspective, but that's just because I have some canted interior walls. But if you look at these walls over here, you'll notice that you don't see that, so you know that it's all straight. Okay? So I'm going to want to go ahead and set this up. I'm going to want to set it up to the point where I can save a scene. Okay? I'm going to say maybe about that size. And then I'm going to go over to view. I'm going to turn off section planes. Okay? That just turns off the plane. It doesn't turn off the section cut. Okay? So if I was to turn off section cuts, I would just be looking at it as like a site plan, basically. Okay? So I want to make sure that I leave section cuts activated. All right? So from here, I also want to turn off axes. And if you have guides or anything else like that, you can turn them off as well. All right? So I'm going to go over to scenes now, and I'm going to save a scene of my floor plan. All right? So hit the plus sign, create new scene, and voila. I'm going to right click on this, rename it, scroll down, let's call this floor plan. I didn't save this actually from last class. Otherwise, you'd probably see your elevations as well. Okay, you should have scenes saved for all of the views that you're creating. All right. So here we have our floor plan. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that guy, that little guy that's sitting right there. I also don't need that box anymore, so I can get rid of that as well. All right, and now we can go through the export process. All right, this process will be very much the same as we did for elevations and for the Francis Ching house. Okay. So, but you may alter it up a little bit because you probably won't need to do an X-ray view because you're not X-raying through anything, okay? But you may choose to create some different exports depending on what you're trying to achieve, all right? So I'm gonna go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. We're gonna go to Options, and we're gonna uncheck Use Viewport Size. In last class we did 3,000. I'm gonna do a little bit bigger. I'm gonna do 4,000 today because I thought it could have been a little bit crisper. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. What number you choose is ultimately up to you. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And let's call this Yosemite House. Actually, before we do that, let's hit cancel. Let's just make sure that we're in the right view. So let's go over to our styles. I think we're in hidden line. I just want to double check hidden line. Yeah, it looks like it. Let's go to default styles. Yeah, so I actually turned on my guides, but let's turn off those, or the axes. So we were actually okay. All right, so I can go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, Options. That looks good. Let's call this Yosemite House, and let's make sure we save it to the right location. Week 16B. Let's call this Yosemite House hidden line. Hidden line plan. Okay. Export. Remember that as we go through this process, we don't want to move the view, so we want them to all align in Photoshop. Okay, so what are some of the other views you might want? You're definitely going to want some shadows. Okay, so let's do that as our next view. Okay, so if I go over to shadows and I turn them on right now, what you're going to notice is that SketchUp it actually creates the shadows as if you literally cut the building in half. Okay, which is not really what we want. We don't want to show the shadows inside the building, and we want the shadows on the exterior to actually be cast as if it's the full building. Okay, so SketchUp doesn't take that into account. It literally just cuts it in half as if you took a knife, and it casts all your shadows accordingly. Okay, so for this portion of the export, I'm going to want to go over to View, and I'm going to turn off section cuts just temporarily. Okay, so notice that it changes your shadow quite a bit. It actually shows me the shadow of the entire roof, which is what I want. Okay, so from here I can go over to let's see, styles, and I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to turn off my edges just like we did for the elevation. All right, and we're going to get something that kind of looks like this. There's still a few shadows that we're not going to ultimately want once we're in Photoshop, but we can fix that once we're in Photoshop. Okay, so from here I'm going to go to File, Export, and we're going to export this next view. Let's call this Yosemite House shadow plan, and we're going to hit export. All right, so let's turn back on the section cuts. So view, let's turn on section cuts. Let's turn on edges. All right, and let's turn off the shadows. So I'm going to go to shadows, turn it off. I'm going to create one more for now. If you want to do more, that's perfectly fine. All right, I'm going to change the style to another one similar to what we've done in the past. Maybe we do a sketchy line, and that's a little too intense. That's a little too much. A little too much. I usually go with the pen gray. Even though I always click on every one of these to pretend like I'm going to pick something else. It's always pen gray though. I like that. I like that outcome. It just gives you a little bit of that sketchy line, but it's not too crazy. Okay, so I like that. I'm going to pick pen gray. I'm going to turn off my section cuts. I'm not section cuts, section planes. So turn those back on. Let's turn section planes off, and let's go ahead and export this view as well. So file, export 2D graphic, Yosemite house, pen gray, plan. All right, and we're gonna go ahead and hit export. So now that we've created all of our exports, we can now go into the post-production process, and we're gonna work towards creating kind of a photorealistic floor plan, okay? We're gonna go for a much different look than what we went with in the past, all right? So let's minimize this. Let's go ahead and open up Photoshop.
What was the last scene or view?
I did pen gray. That was the one that I did. But you can choose something else if you like other views or other styles. So let's open up Photoshop. Somebody left their glasses. Every time. My legacy is going to live on in this classroom for literally ever. My photos are going to pop up for every single teacher that uses this classroom for the rest of eternity.
Does it pop up for the teachers?
Oh, if they use Photoshop, I'm sure it does. I suppose there's probably not too many other teachers that use Photoshop, besides Grant maybe. All right, so let's open up our first one. Let's open up the hidden line view. So open, go to our thumb drive, and so let's go to hidden line plan, and let's click on open. Okay, that's perfect. That's actually a really good size in terms of how much white space you want around your floor plan. Okay, so that's a good reference. You don't want it too teeny that you can't see the details of the floor plan. Okay, so I would say focus on about what you see here in the on the screen. All right, so let's overlay our next two images. Let's do place, and let's do pen gray. All right, that looks good. Check. And let's also do file, place, shadow. Yay, bravo. All right, and we'll go ahead and place that. All right. I'm going to turn off shadows just a little bit, or for now, until we get back to working on that portion. So last class we talked about if we want to either minimize the effect, one of these effects, or we want to maximize one of those effects, what was that process? So if we want to, if my sketchy line right now is a little too intense and we say we want to kind of reduce that, how would we go about doing that? Victor? Talked about it last class. We actually talked about it in multiple classes.
Opacity.
Thank you. Yes, opacity. If we want to intensify it, maybe we really like it and we want it to be double as dark. How would we do that? It's not opacity because it's already at 100%. You could actually do overlay. Yeah, that will actually darken that line. There's actually another process though that I think will give a better effect. Anybody remember that? Duplicate the layer, exactly. So if I take this pen gray here and I want that to be darker, I'm going to go ahead and say, actually before we do that though, let's go ahead and add our multiply blending mode to each of these so that we can see through them all. All right, I'm going to, let's see, layer from background on my background layer. All right, so I can see that. Let's also apply a multiply blending mode. Let's apply the multiply blending mode to the shadow as well. Okay, turn it off. And now I'm going to go back to pen gray and I'm going to duplicate it. Okay, notice how that got just a little bit darker. It's not too intense. So that's off, and that's on. You really can't see. I can see it actually happening on my computer. Can't really see it as much on the screen. You can even duplicate it again if you needed to. All right, so that's getting even darker. Okay, so those are just a couple options. All right, I'm going to leave one of them off. So now we can go about actually creating the rendered form of this project. Okay, I'm going to turn everything off minus my original layer, which I'm going to go ahead and rename it so that I remember that it's my hidden line view. I'm picking this layer to kind of work off of because it has the most solid lines. Okay, the sketchy lines, sometimes they go through each other, sometimes there's little gaps and openings. So if you use your magic wand, it won't always select the regions quite as good as you might want. Okay, so let's see. Let's double click on this. Let's call this hidden line. Okay, so let's go about adding some of the details. Let's first add the poche. Okay, we want to poche our walls so that all of the cut areas have more pop. Okay, we went through the same process when we were working in Illustrator. We're going to do it the same thing, but a little bit different because we're using a different software. Okay, so I'm going to click on my hidden line view, my hidden line layer, and I'm also going to click on my magic wand. Okay, so magic wand tool. All right, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to select all of the areas that I'm cutting through. Okay, so let's see, there's our wall. Technically we'd want to cut through our mullions as well. These are also little important areas. Bear with me for a second as I fill these in. Of course I have a bunch of tiny little ones. Hopefully you don't have quite as many. Alright, so I'm selecting all of my cut walls right now. That's about half of them. So I'm holding down shift right now with my magic wand. Okay, I'm holding down shift so that I can add multiple regions to my fill layer that I'm about to create. Okay, about 3/4 of the way through. Got a few more. Alright, almost done. Alright, so that looks good. Make sure double check we got all of them selected. That looks good. Looks like they're all selected. Okay, so now that we have everything selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to layer, new. Actually, nope, not layer new. Let's go down to new. No. Let's see, what was I looking for? Looking for new fill layer. Oh, there it is. Gosh, just looking right past it. So I'm going to go down to layer, new fill layer, and I'm going to click on solid color. Okay, I'm going to click on solid color, and let's call this wall poche, or we can just call it poche. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and notice that it fills in everything black. So what's the reason why we would use a fill layer versus just saying fill or using our paintbrush tool to color those areas in? What's the reason why we would use the fill layer?
Fast.
It is fast. I would actually argue it's probably the fastest way. Using the paintbrush or the other fill tool is probably very close, but I would say there's one kind of predominant reason why we would use a fill layer. Any guesses? The reason why is because I can change the color. Okay, so I can double click on this little box and I say, okay, maybe black's a little too intense. I actually want gray. Okay, all you gotta do is just change that color and it's gonna do that. If you were to use if you were just to say edit fill and you fill in all of that area, you're gonna have to go back and reselect all of those little regions the next time you want to fill it. Okay, so that's the nice thing about using a fill layer. Okay. And basically it just creates a little layer mask, so if you want to add or subtract areas from it, you would just go through the process of selecting the region and using your paintbrush. You guys remember the white versus the black, okay? White removes it, black adds it, right? Or other way around? I think that's correct. All right, so that's gonna be how you're gonna want to poche your walls, okay? So the next step that we're going to take to jazz this up just a little bit is we're going to want to add a background texture, okay? All right, we're going to want to add something along the outside to kind of make this look realistic, okay? As if you were cutting through the building, but you also saw the ground around it, okay? So you're in Yosemite, there's dirt, there's rock, there's all kinds of stuff around your building that you would likely see in a floor plan, okay? We're not going to just have a white, a white background in this case, all right? So we need to go on our good old favorite site, Creative Commons, creativecommons.org, all right? And I'm going to try to find an image that looks kind of like dirt. Anybody have a guess on what kind of image we would search for that might look like this? Anybody? What kind of texture have we talked about in the past that might just kind of look like dirt or some kind of ground plane? Yeah, grunge image. Yeah, let's try that. So let's go to search the commons, Flickr. Let's say grunge image. I remember the first time I typed in grunge image, I spelled it wrong. I got a bunch of like death-looking clowns that popped up. It's kind of amusing, but I haven't done that since. So let's find something that kind of looks like dirt. Or kind of looks like some kind of a ground texture. Okay. There's not really one correct image that really works perfectly for this. You can be a little bit creative, so it could be something like that. I mean, that looks like a crack in the earth, and that could be kind of like ground. This kind of does as well. That kind of looks like it could be some kind of a ground surface. Let's add another descriptor though. Maybe we can add something that would help this search. Let's say ground grunge image. Okay, kind of getting somewhere. There's some images. Okay, this one's actually kind of cool. Gray concrete. Let's try that one. Okay, it kind of looks like it could be a surface. With a little creativity, we could probably easily fix this. Okay, to make it look the way that we want. So I'm going to say download this photo and original size. All right, you guys should put that in your thumb drive. I already have a bunch of these, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to File Place. I'm going to place that image into my scene. All right, so File Place, I'm going to go to my downloads. Nope, not there. Downloads, there's that grunge image. I'm going to go ahead and go File Place, and I'm going to stretch it out to fill my entire screen. All right, I'm not worried about proportions here because I'm just going after the texture. Okay, proportions don't really matter. I'm gonna go ahead and say place. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, now I want this to have kind of a dirt effect. So let's see, how can I do that? Actually, several ways you could do this. You could add an adjustment layer. You could add kind of a, you can change the, some of the different color variations of the image. I am going to place a color directly over it. Okay, like so. So I clicked on the rectangle tool. I'm going to draw a rectangle directly over that grunge image. Okay, right now it's black. I'm going to change that color to, let's say, brown. Maybe something kind of like that. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to change the opacity to this to maybe 50%. No, let's try even more. Let's say like 20%. All right, we're getting somewhere. I'm going to rasterize that grunge layer. I'm going to even reduce the opacity of it, maybe 60. Okay, we're starting to get kind of a surface that looks somewhat kind of like ground. Okay, you guys can manipulate this how you want so that you get the optimal results. Okay, so let's see, maybe get a little bit more brown. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and work with this. I want to combine these two so that they become one image. All right, so I'm going to select them both, right click. I'm going to say merge layers, all right, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that off here just for a few minutes, all right? So I'm going to highlight that, and now I'm going to go down to my hidden line layer, and I'm going to use my magic wand, and I'm going to select the background, okay, like this. So I have everything but my floor plan selected, all right? Now that I have that, I'm going to move that grunge image right above my hidden line view, okay? And with that grunge image selected, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on now. With the grunge image selected, with everything selected here in my background, I'm going to click on the layer mask tool. Okay, and notice that it cuts out everything that wasn't selected. Okay, so now we've kind of created this surface that somewhat kind of looks like dirt. Okay, there's probably lots of things that we could add to this to even make it more look like dirt. Okay, but I'm going to continue to add some more items to make this look more photorealistic. Okay, you guys could add things like hardwood floors. You guys can add all these different textures to the interior of your floor plan. Okay, I'll do that for you here in just a few minutes. But I'm going to add some trees. Okay, I want to add some trees to my floor plan so that we start to get some additional texture and variation to what's going on the outside of my cabin. Okay, so let's see. Let's go over to where might you get some trees. Okay, you can go on Google. You can go on Creative Commons. So you could say tree. They do. So I'm going to say tree plan PNG. Okay, PNG file is key. All right, so I'm going to say tree plan PNG. I'm going to go to images, and we got a whole bunch here. Okay, so which one would work really well? I'm going to go with the kind of sketchy looking one. I don't want one that really looks super final. So, but up to you and which one you pick. I'm going to say I want this one. Okay, it's loading. Notice the transparent backgrounds. That's a good thing. And another thing to think about is what kind of tree are you putting on there? So I'm picking one that's like kind of sketchy, kind of realistic. Don't pick a palm tree. We're in Yosemite. I always get one person that puts in like a bunch of tropical trees and they're totally in the wrong environment. Okay, so something to think about. So I'm going to go ahead. What was that?
What is that kind of greenhouse? They've got palm trees inside.
Well, then you can put a palm tree inside your, I'm guessing, a very massive greenhouse that can house a palm tree. All right, so I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to save image as. Okay, I'm going to put it in my folder, week 16B. Look, I have a folder for trees. All right, save. Okay, so there's one. You may even download a couple. Maybe you have a variation of trees. Maybe you have 2 or 3 different tree types in your plan. I'll start with one. All right, so I'm going to go to File, Place. Let's find that tree. Let's place it into my scene. What was that one? Ooh, teeny tiny. Actually, before I do that, let me see what the size of this image is. Okay, so right now what I'm creating is 41 inches by 34 inches, so that's massive. So when that tree came in, it was teeny tiny. That just kind of told me that my image that I'm working with is pretty large. I'm gonna go ahead and reduce this to like 20. Okay, so okay. All right. There we go. It's not going to change the image quality of this. It's just going to make the overall image size a lot smaller. Okay, so let's try that again. File, Place. Let's put in that tree. All right, it's still kind of small, but that's okay. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to start to place some of these trees into my scene. Okay, I like it about like that. I think that's about the right size trees. Right size tree. You might have some varying tree sizes as well. Okay, so I'm going to say check. All right. So if I want to duplicate this, I could say duplicate. All right, maybe we add another one. Whoops. Maybe I take that tree, bring it over here. Maybe this one's a little bit bigger. Okay, kind of like that. Maybe I put it in the corner. Okay, File, Place. I'm going to add a couple more. All right, let's add one more. Maybe it's kind of like that. Okay, you may add 4, 5, 6, 8, 2, whatever you think is appropriate. Okay, so now that we got some trees into our site, what are some other things that are kind of missing that would add some detail to this? Any ideas? A trail, yeah. Let's actually add that here in just a second. Yeah, maybe like a path that goes up to the front door, or a driveway or something like that. Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we'll come to that in a second. Before we do that, though, let's maybe add some shadows. Okay, we created a shadow layer for our building. Let's also add some shadows, though, for our trees. Okay, we would also see some shadows for our trees, right? So again, just like that, you could also search that on Google. Okay, I've already saved a couple. All right, so I'm going to go to File, Place, and let's go to Large Icon. I have these different silhouettes of some trees that would probably resemble some trees that you would see in Yosemite, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take one of these, Place. All right, and there's a silhouette of one of these trees here. Okay, I'm going to make it about the size of what we're working with here. So that's probably about right, something about like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit check. Okay, and I'm going to delete actually the bottom of that. I don't want the bottom of that tree. So let's rasterize this layer so it can be editable. Let's delete that. And what would allow this tree to be a little transparent? Anybody guesses? Maybe a blending mode of some sort? Multiply? Yeah, let's try that. So let's go to multiply. Okay, actually not multiply. Let's go to, is it overlay or lighten? Go back. Let's try, yeah, there we go, perfect. So screen, or overlay. Why do we choose overlay? Because it's black. Okay, it's not, if it had white in the image, then multiply would allow the white to go through it. Because our image is predominantly black, you want to use overlay. Okay, so now that shadow is actually see-through, and it actually gives us a darker ground plane, which is actually what we really want. Okay, we don't want to erase the ground plane, we just want it to be a darker figure. Okay, so let's go about how we might actually create a shadow here. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to say, oh, actually, before we do that, before we actually put it in the right position, let's think about what direction our shadows are in for our roof, right? So I think they're all coming, let's turn it on real quick. Here's our shadow going in this direction, okay? So we want the shadow of our trees to mimic that, all right? So we also want the color of it to mimic it as well, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and take that tree layer. I'm going to rotate it. So maybe it's about like that. Okay, so that it's about the same as our building, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and place it kind of like that, and I want to get rid of some of the tree that is currently overlapping. Actually, maybe let's try putting it below the layer. There we go. That's actually a lot better. Okay, so now we have a shadow for that tree. All right, that looks pretty good. How could we change the color of that a little bit? A couple different ways. All right, so we could say, actually, I want to try something else too. Let's try, if I take overlay off, go back to normal. Let me try just adding an opacity to it. Let me see if that actually gives us a closer, yeah, that actually works, I think, a little bit better. So it actually gives us a much closer resemblance to the shadow or the color of the shadow of the building, okay? So whatever methodology you want to use, that was fine. All right, so that's actually almost right on the dot. Okay, I think 50 is even closer. So there's our shadow for our tree. All right, I can duplicate that a couple times. Okay, maybe it's about like that. All right, so I don't need it to go inside of our window. So I could take my masking tool. I could say, "See you later." And that looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to duplicate my first one. Duplicate layer. Let's move it up here. You're not really going to see one with that one, but you probably see it with this one right here. Okay, and there we have a nice little example of what that might look like. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I want to make sure that my shadows that I created for my building are also accurate. Okay, so I'm going to go to that shadow layer, which is Yosemite House shadow. I'm going to click on that. Let's rasterize it so that we can edit it. And let's get rid of the shadows that were created by the roof line. So I'm going to select all of those about like that. And let's get rid of all of these. And that looks pretty good. Okay, that looks a lot better. All right, that actually looks like we have a very realistic effect on the outside of our building. Again, okay, if the shadow's a little too intense, again, you can use the opacity if you want to turn it down just a little bit. So maybe it's like 60, all right? And that looks a little bit more realistic, okay? So maybe 70, all right? I'm gonna go ahead and intensify those shadows a little bit. I'm gonna use my dodge and burn layer, okay? So I'm gonna go to layer. I'm gonna go to new layer. And again, mode, overlay, and I'm going to put overlay with 50% neutral gray, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, and what's our shortcut to apply that layer only to my shadow layer below? Keyboard shortcut. Control Alt G, right? Control Alt G. Notice that little arrow that shows it applying only to the shadow layer below. All right, so now that I've done that, I can go through, I could take my burn tool. So burn tool here, let's make my brush a little bit bigger. I also want to check a brush that has somewhat of a gradient to it. Okay, that's nice, I like that one right there. And I can start to add some gradation to that shadow. Okay, notice that it's much darker along the edge of the building. Okay, I could do the same thing with our trees. Actually, I can't because it's actually only applying it to my shadow, but you could do that. You just have to create another layer that goes above your tree shadows. You might consider taking all of your tree shadows once you're done, merging them into one layer, okay, so that if you do want to mess with the shadows a little bit, then you won't have to do that 3 times, okay? So that looks pretty good, and I can even take my dodge tool, go through that same process, and lighten up the outer edges. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so that might look something kind of like that, right? Any questions so far? All right, so yes. You could definitely do the same thing for the trees. I can't do it right this second because right now this layer is only pointing to this layer. All right, if you wanted to though, this is what you would do. If you wanted to do the same thing to the trees, which I think is a great idea, I'm gonna take those 3 tree shadows that I did, all right, I'm gonna merge them into one layer. So I'm gonna say tree shadows. Tree shadows. Okay, that looks good. All right, I'm gonna reduce the opacity of them just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna go through that same process. So layer, new layer. Let's change that to overlay, fill with neutral color, 50% gray. Okay, Control Alt G. Okay, and I can do that same process. So here's our dodge tool. Let's see, why is that not working? It's showing it working, tree shadows. So why are you not working? Is there something? Huh, let's see, give me 1 second here. Why is that not working? Hardness, no, that looks right. Huh. I can't think of, I might have to come back to that. That should technically work. Let's see, that's the right layer. Control Alt G, yep. Tree shadows. Huh. We'll come back to that in just a second. That should work. I'm not sure why that's not working. But before we do that, let's go ahead and add a path. So that was something that was suggested a little bit earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and say new layer. Okay, I'm going to add that to the very top because I want this to actually overlay everything that's going on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call this path. Okay, so path. I'm going to go ahead and draw. I'm going to use my lasso tool. All right, lasso tool, and I'm going to draw a path from my front door. Or maybe it's like a driveway. Maybe it comes around like that. Okay, and we come down to here. And I'm going to draw something that kind of looks like that. And then go up, finish it off. And there we have kind of a little kind of rough selection. Maybe it's like a gravel road that goes into it, okay? I want to fix this little area up a little bit. Go to my rectangular marquee. I'm holding down Shift, all right? Holding down Shift to see my plus sign, just so I get a nice clean edge right there at my wall, okay? And again, I'm gonna go ahead and use my brush tool. You could also use a fill layer if you want to, all right? So I'm gonna use my brush tool though. Brush, let's make this a lot bigger. Let's pick a color. Whoops. Maybe we want to pick, I'm going to pick a dark brown again. Okay, I'm going to fill that in. All right. Deselect it, Control D for deselect, and I'm going to add an opacity of maybe like 50%. And there's a little gravel path that goes to our front door. Okay, so that's certainly something that I think is a great idea. All right, so I'm going to do.
You could do like a layer mask and put it like a rectangle.
Sure, absolutely. You could definitely add like a layer mask. You could add an actual like paving pattern to that if you want to. If you wanted to do that, it would be the same process as if you wanted to add some hardwood floors to your interior. Okay, so I'm going to do that for my last step here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Creative Commons. Let's download a nice little pattern. I'm going to say seamless hardwood floor texture. All right, that's kind of good. That goes with my contemporary kind of gray theme. Let's select that. All right, I'm going to download it. All right, I'm going to go to File, Place. Okay, we're going to go through the process of tiling here. We're going to do the same thing that we did yesterday for one of our exterior materials. So I'm going to go ahead and place that into my file. I'm going to make it large enough that I don't want to distort the image, but I want it to fill the majority of my house. So I'm going to say Place. I'm going to duplicate this layer, move it over. We'll go ahead and that's called tiling. All right, from here I can take these two, I can duplicate them, move it down. All right, I can now select all of them. I'm just going to keep duplicating the entire selection to speed up the process of tiling. Okay, now I got 8. I can probably create one more. Duplicate. Okay, and voila. Okay, so now that I've created all of my textures needed for this, I can select all of these. And I'm going to merge them into one layer, and I'm going to call this wood floor. What was that?
Rasterize them first.
When you merge it, it rasterizes it by itself. You could merge it, then you're kind of duplicating steps, but as soon as you merge the layers, it will rasterize it. So I'm going to say wood floor, all right, and I'm going to put that directly above my hidden line layer. Okay, kind of like that. All right, I'm going to put it right over my wood floor. I'm going to turn that off here for just a few seconds. And then from here, I'm going to select that hidden line layer. I'm going to use my magic wand, and I'm going to select my interior spaces. Luckily, mine worked perfect. I have one click, and I have every interior floor selected. I hope everyone's is the same process. Likely not, but you know, lucky me today. All right, so now that I have my entire floor assembly selected, I can turn on my floor texture again, select that wood floor, and I'm going to click on Create Layer Mask. Okay, and you'll see here that now we have a nice texture for that wood floor. Okay, if you want to add stuff like furniture, you can do that. Import the PNG into the file, add a plan view of a couch, okay, or furniture, or whatever you want. Okay. To finalize this, I'm not going to do this in front of you. I might add some textures to my interior floor areas, okay, to kind of finalize that since they're not all going to be white. And that would be about it, okay? So I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so I filled in a couple of the other materials, all right? So basically this is what I'm looking to see for this step. Okay, I added a texture to all of my walls. And if you want to take it a step further and add furniture, that's fine too, but for the most part, this would be a really nice example of a rendered floor plan. Okay, so as soon as you're done, save it. Save it as probably a Photoshop file and a JPEG. Okay, the JPEG will be much smaller. So Yosemite House plan, final, save. Okay, I'm also going to save that as a JPEG. It's not going to let me do that until I save it as a Photoshop file first. Okay, so JPEG, save, okay. Okay, so I'll leave this up on the screen. If you have questions, let me know. Yeah?